Good evening. It is 6 o'clock. So we're going to open the regular Planning Commission meeting of Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. Do we want to start with a call to order?
Okay, roll call. Chair Basso
Here.
and Vice Chair Stewart is absent. So Commissioner Rubin, Commissioner Zamora,
Present.
Commissioner Dynan,
Here.
and Commissioner Alterman.
Here.
Any planning commissioner, member, or staff who has a direct conflict of interest on any scheduled agenda item to be considered is to declare their conflict at this time. Nothing? Okay, at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Miguel Galvez for some introductions of new staff.
Good evening. My name is Miguel Galvez. I'm a contract city planner with J.B. Anderson, but I'm serving on an interim capacity with the retirement of Donna Kinney. I will be filling in while her position is vacant. So I'm happy to be here. I was on the planning commission here in Riverbank from 1985 through 89. I've had over 30 years of land use planning since then. So I'm happy to be here. I also want to take the opportunity to introduce a new city planner. If he can come on up. Samuel. Oh, this is Samuel Cepeda Bencourt, Associate Planner with the City of Riverbank. He was hired in December, so we welcome him. Yeah, there you go. Now he's on the camera. Don't be camera shy. So we'd like to introduce and welcome Sam to the team.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Did you want to say anything about you, your background, or anything you want to share with?
Sure. I have a FEMA experience. I worked 5 years with the Federal Emergency Management Agency as an environmental protection specialist. I have 5 years with the floodplain delineation experience and wetland protection, and also a lot of environmental policy, and a lot of NEPA experience. And I'm glad to be here in the city to learn about CEQA and a lot of city planning, because that's a little bit something that I don't have. But I appreciate the welcoming, and I appreciate Miguel and the staff here in Riverbank.
Thank you, Sam. I have 2 other items I'd like to at least take the moment to discuss since I have the floor. 2 revisions to the agenda. Item 2.2 is revised. It is changed to approval of the February 2024 agenda. A different agenda item was previously listed. And then we added item 2.3, approval of the meeting minutes on November 21, 2023. So I just want to put that in the record. That concludes my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to public comments. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Individual comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes per person, and each person may speak once during this time. Time cannot be yielded to another person. Under state law, matters presented during the public comment period cannot be discussed or acted upon. For record purposes, please state your name and city of residence. Please make your comments directly to the Planning Commission members.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Milt Treeweiler, and I'm a Stanislaus County resident, and I've lived here all my life. We have many things to be concerned about today. In today's world, we have to be very careful about what we listen to and what we believe. There are too many people in the world who are dishonest, untrustworthy, and unethical. They live in a dream world. They worship money, power, and pleasure. There are people here in Riverbank that are scheming to destroy the future for our descendants. Their plan is to build more houses to bring in Bay Area people to live in Riverbank. This city is surrounded by the best farmland in the world. Once you build on this farmland, you will never be able to grow food we need to eat so we can survive. We know what we're doing. We would be destroying the prime farmland we need to grow food on. That would be irresponsible, and all of our descendants would have to suffer for the bad decisions we're making today. There is not 1 acre of farmland in some entire states or even countries as good as the farmland to the west of Riverbank. This farmland can grow food for hundreds and hundreds of years. We must preserve it so our children can have food to eat and can live happy lives. Let's do the right thing and preserve our prime farmland west of Riverbank. Please, please, please open your eyes and your hearts and save this farmland for our children and our descendants. Please vote against the proposed Riverwalk development. And the reason I say that is because it is true. This is the best farmland in the world, right here in our valley. Stanislaus County rates number 10 in the entire United States. That's how good our farmland is. We're number 10 for production in the entire United States. And we have to take this responsibly. We have to think about what we're doing and about what we're doing to our descendants. I mean, they've got to have food. We all have to have food to survive. I did have a flyer there that I passed out that gives some other reasons. I actually went around here in Riverbank and I talked to probably 1,500 of your citizens. And I passed out this flyer. And they were all in agreement with what we were talking about. And at the same time, they said they had not even heard about this proposal. We were doing this about 9 months ago, 9 months ago. They had not even heard about this proposal. Some developer wants to make money. They're not concerned about you people in Riverbank or the people around, Riverbank. They're only concerned about their money. That's it. Why should we let them do something like this to us? We shouldn't be doing this. We should vote against this. I know your vote is a very important vote. The Planning Commission votes against it. It still goes to the council. But you vote against it, that's a big plus to keep this from happening. So I'm hopeful that you'll really think this out and think about it carefully and do the right thing, vote no on the Riverwalk proposal. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Appreciate your service and you guys being here and everybody here today on this rainy day. And my name's Kent Mitchell and I am a Riverbank resident. I live in the River Heights area. I've been there since 1990, 34 years now. And I also came to speak about the Riverwalk project. And those concerned about this, I'm going to echo some of what Milt said. I'll try to say it in a little different way. This land is proposed for urbanization is at the top tier of quality soils in the world with available water. And the soil is especially well suited to groundwater recharge through irrigation. So I'm wondering, what's the logic of paving concrete on the best soils and water recharge areas when there's available land for development that doesn't have the best soils? To me, this just looks like the definition of urban sprawl. The proposal is largely an age-restricted development for residents 55 and over. Stanislaus County does need affordable housing for families that have been priced out of the housing market, but this proposal does nothing to meet those needs. We really don't need additional housing for affluent retirees, largely from the Bay Area. There are some questions in regards to Riverwalk about the suitability of the proposed sanitary sewer system, along with water quality and availability. And the constricted access to the site from McHenry, Coffee, Patterson, and Hogue Roads have current residents alarmed about the prospect of major transportation problems. Now, lastly, I just want to finish by talking about the Urban Limit Initiative, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and fell short of the signatures required. Now, I was part of that signature gathering group, and I want to give you some perspective on it, because it may sound like we just couldn't get enough signatures, and that's far from the truth. We needed about 1,270, and we turned in almost 200 more than that. We were thinking it's a done deal. It's just a formality now. So it was shocking and to us kind of heartbreaking to see that there was like 300 fraudulent, I'll say fraudulent, signatures for a variety of reasons, falling 103 short. We could have easily gotten that. It's just that we thought we had enough already. And the evidence points to incompetence and likely fraudulence among the paid signature gatherers. So that, I wanted you guys to know why it fell short. And I want to finish by saying that when I went door to door, there were a few that were, I wouldn't say they're in favor of it, they had no problem with the development, Riverwalk. But the vast majority of residents in the Park Ridge area where I live, River Heights, were against the proposal. So thank you for your time.
Do we have any other comments? Hearing none, we will move on. I'm going to close the public comment period and we'll move on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are to be acted upon by a single action of the Planning Commission unless otherwise requested by an individual Planning Commission member or member of the public for special consideration. Otherwise, the recommendation of staff will be accepted and acted upon by motion of the Planning Commission. So item 2.1, I'm going to go through 2.1 and 2.2 together. Item 2.1, posting of the agenda. The agenda for the February 20th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting was posted on the City Community Center bulletin board, City Hall North and South bulletin boards, post office, city website, and emailed to the library on February 7th, 2024. Item 2.2, approval of the February 20th, 2024 agenda. This provides an opportunity for the Planning Commission or staff to recommend that an item be placed on the agenda for discussion or to adjust the proposed agenda to allow an item to be taken out of order.
I move that we accept items 2.1 and 2.2.
We pause, if we can pause, and the revised agenda includes item 2.3 in the consent calendar.
I didn't include 2.3 because I think two of us that were for voting were absent.
And as I heard, the chair was going to do that under two separate motions.
Yes, sorry.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call. Chair Basso,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin, Commissioner Zamora,
Yes.
Commissioner Dynan, and Commissioner Alterman.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, item 2.3, approval of the minutes of the November 21st, 2023 Planning Commission meeting having been read by the individual planning commissioner and stands approved as submitted.
And just to add, Commissioners Rubin and Stewart, who is also absent tonight, have to abstain from voting because they were absent during that meeting. So do I have a first?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 21st.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Chair Basso,
Yes.
Commissioner Zamora,
Yes.
Commissioner Dynan,
Yes.
and Commissioner Alterman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 3.1, Planning Commission Procedures. The annual nomination and appointment of chair and vice chair per Planning Commission rules and procedures. The current order is Chair Basso, Vice Chair Stewart, Commissioners Dynan, Zamora, and Halterman. Alternate commissioners are Link and alternate commissioners Rubin. The new order will be Chair Stewart, Vice Chair Zamora, Commissioners Dynan. It says Zamora there, but it should be Basso, and Halterman. Alternate commissioners are Link and Rubin.
Move that we accept item 3.1.
Roll call. So, Chair Basso,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin, Commissioner Zamora,
Yes.
Commissioner Dynan,
Yes.
and Commissioner Alterman.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the Planning Commission Public Workshop and other matters. So we have 4.1 and 4.2. Do we have somebody reporting on 4.1 with the public workshop on the housing element?
Yes, Chair. We have David Niskanen of JB Anderson will be making the presentation on the sixth cycle housing element update. Take it away, David.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the commission, David Niskanen, JB Anderson Planning. We are contracted to work on and update the city's housing element. Just to give you an overview of kind of what I'm going to be talking about today, I'll discuss what is a housing element, why it's important, the regional housing needs assessment, and state laws that are now in effect that kind of affect the update. A new requirements for the site inventory analysis, affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements. That's a new state law that I'll explain. Our project timeline and next steps, kind of where do we go from here? And then at the end of the presentation, there's no action item that commission takes tonight. It's a public workshop, so we'd appreciate input from the commission as well as from the public, kind of in an open forum. Okay. So what is a housing element? It's one of the required elements of the general plan. Other elements, if you flip through your Riverbank general plan, you'll see an element for land use, mobility or circulation, conservation, open space, safety, and noise. The last housing element was adopted and certified in 2016. We also did that update for the city, so we're well aware of city issues and city demographics and updating the tables and the figures in the housing element. It covers an 8-year period from June 30th, 2023 to December 31st, 2031. What that means is the housing element is a document that provides the availability of land to meet the city's housing needs, both within the city as well as in the sphere of influence, if needed. And the Regional Housing Needs Assessment is a document that's prepared by the state of California, which is handed down to the Stanislaus Council of Governments. And it's a kind of overall growth plan for the region as a whole, the county. And each of the jurisdictions in the county, including Riverbank, are given a number of units that we have to accommodate. And I'll go over that in the presentation a little bit later on. So it includes a number of components to reach that regional housing needs assessment. And they include a review of the last housing element, goals and policies, what worked, what didn't work, what's being continued. A housing needs assessment, so that's taking a look at everything from demographics to housing, households, to special housing needs, including homeless, farm worker labor, disabilities, and things like that. Housing constraints assessment, which is split up into two components. One is a governmental constraint analysis, where we take a look at processing times for applications, development impact fees, anything that is on the government side that may be seen as a constraint to housing development. The whole goal is to try to help produce housing and help guide and facilitate that. And then there's also non-government constraints, which could include housing development costs, labor, could include land costs, the availability of water and sewer being another component to that as well. And then we take a look at the adequate sites inventory, and that's split up also into two components. One being a vacant site inventory, where we take a look at all the vacant site available in the city that has availability to hook up to sewer and water, is in an ideal location as far as within the city, like infill development. We also take a look at how many units are expected to be built, either in like low density, medium density, or high density based on an average density qualification that we use as part of the calculation. So in the housing element itself, there's a table that includes like APN, address, where it's located at, what's on the site. If it's not vacant, like a non-vacant site, then we'll take a look at if it can include additional housing. Like for instance, if it's a single family home on a large parcel, in the future, it may be developed into additional units, something like that. The other component is this analysis of fair housing. That's the affirmatively furthering fair housing. So that's really taking a look at past historical segregation and discrimination policies that may have been in place in the past, and trying to make sure that housing is both equitable and fair across the board, across all income groups and racial groups. The housing resources assessment is an assessment where we take a look at water and sewer and making sure that there's adequate services and plan for that, both in the sewer master plan that the city maintains, as well as the urban water management plan that the city maintains is required to update every 5 years. And then finally, after a culmination of all that analysis, it's a lot of work, the implementation plan, which is a list of programs that the city is intended to carry out. Those could be as simple as updating the city's municipal code to make sure that density bonus law is up to date with the state's requirements, updating development standards to reduce parking requirements for multifamily housing as an example to try to expedite that type of development. Or it could be assisting, Stanislaus County Housing Authority to reach out to nonprofit developers to accommodate affordable housing in the city. One important distinction, however, is what a housing element does and what it does not do. What it does is assess and address constraints to housing developments over the next 8 years, 8-year period. It guides housing development policy, as well as identify opportunities to meet the housing needs, that vacant and non-vacant site inventory. What it does not do is require the city to build the number of units identified in the regional housing needs assessment, which I'll go over in the next slide. And it does not solve all housing problems. The reality is you still need the capital investment for developers to come in and build both market rate and non-market rate housing. So there's that reality. What this is, it's a policy document to help guide developers in identifying a good site, as well as understanding what the community has as far as demographics and things like that. Okay, so this is the regional housing needs assessment. The city is required to plan for and to accommodate a total of 3,591 total units and split up into these income groups. There's the very low income and low income, which is less than 50% of the area median income based on Stanislaus County average incomes. Low income, which is 50 to 80%, and moderate, which is 80 to 120%, and then above moderate is beyond 120%. So way to kind of break it down or think about it this way is above moderate is your standard like single family home for the most part. And then very low and low are obviously subsidized housing, multifamily housing most of the time, though not always the case. It could be single family homes that are also subsidized. This gives you an idea of the 2023 annual income limits for the city, actually for Stanislaus County as a whole. So the top number is the number of persons per household. Most of the time we're looking at a 4-person household. And these are the areas that if it is a subsidized housing, usually they'll have a number of units for each income group and then a total number of units that are subsidized in the development. So when we take a look at the number, like vacant site inventory, there's areas to kind of break it down, like a percentage of multifamily being for moderate, low income and above moderate, as well as that for a single family. And then what we do is we put those assumptions in the housing element so everyone understands how it's broken down. As it relates to the six cycle housing element bills, there's a number of new ones since the last housing element was adopted, all with kind of the focus on the state trying to help facilitate housing development across the board, both for low income and for moderate or for above moderate housing. The first one is the adequate housing element sites. That's AB 1397. That one includes additional requirements that we need to take into account when we're looking at vacant and non-vacant site in the inventory. SB 166 is a no net loss requirement, which means that in the future, if we identify a site for low income and something comes or a development comes in for market rate and it's less units than what's anticipated in the housing element, there's a gap in the number of units, and that has to be identified either somewhere else, or we may end up with a surplus in here that we can say, okay, we're good. We're going to still meet our regional housing needs allocation, even if that site is developed at a lower density or lower number of units. The AB 686 is the AFFH requirements. Again, it's designed to facilitate deliberate action to explicitly address, combat, and relieve disparities resulting from patterns in segregation to foster more inclusive communities. AB 72 is a housing element enforcement bill, which means that if the city's housing element is not certified, which means it's not reviewed by the state and meets statutory requirements, there may be penalties in non-compliance, which could be in the form of the city wouldn't be, they wouldn't have grants available to them, as an example. AB 671 is a new bill that requires the housing elements to include a plan to incentivize ADUs. That's pretty easy in Riverbank's case because there's already ADU plans available that the city was in partnership with the other cities and the county. And so it's really just facilitating people to use that. They're free, and it saves quite a bit of money for folks wanting to build ADUs. There's new reporting requirements for the housing element. And what that means is right now we're doing our first public workshop, and at some point in the future, we'll have a draft ready for Planning Commission to review. And then once council reviews it, we'll send it off to the state for their draft review. So they take 90 days to review it, and they'll come back with some comments. And then we'll update it from there, and then it'll come back to Planning Commission for adoption. So there's kind of a whole process involved in this, which this bill just changes some of the reporting requirements that are needed. AB 1763 is an enhanced density bonus law, which just changes the density bonus calculations to allow for higher densities and incentives for projects that are proposing low-income units. The AB 2162 is a bill for supportive housing that's a permitted use without discretionary review in zones where multifamily and mixed uses are permitted. And then SB 6 is a bill that includes the opportunity for the city to use commercial sites as part of their regional housing needs allocation to potentially allow for mixed uses in those areas where previously commercial was exclusively commercial. And then finally, AB 1851 is religious institution affiliated housing, which allows religious institutions to develop affordable housing at a place of worship owned by a religious institution. So again, help facilitate the development of housing. So for the site inventory, we look at a number of things, a number of items. One is to find sites that are suitable and available for development. You know, what our goal is to primarily use vacant sites because those sites are available for development right away over the next 8 years. If it's a non-vacant site, it gets a little tricky because, as you know, sites that are developed, they don't change very often, and they don't, develop into additional units because the person living there obviously wants to stay in the house or, keep the development. the way it is for a long period of time. So when we take a look at sites inventory, we use that lens of finding sites that are available over the next 8 years. We also look at sites that can accommodate the RHNA by income level, as well as, sites with appropriate zoning. So we'll first look at the low-density residential sites, medium and high density. And then if the city allows residential and some commercial or mixed-use areas, obviously we want to use those as well. So we're going to try to take a look at, the most number of sites we can use available within city limits. And then the sites must meet new state requirements. That just means that we're taking a little bit of a deeper dive and looking at the existing use, potential previous use, as well as availability of sewer and water. And in past housing elements, there's been an issue where cities were using sites that were just kind of way off and not, realistically developable within that next time frame. And the state kind of cracked down on that. So, and then finally, the AFFH kind of comes in again, which is kind of a growing theme throughout the entire housing element. But as it relates to the site inventory, the locations must, if we're identifying all low-income sites in one singular area of the city, that may be an issue in the state size. We want to make sure that it's kind of spread throughout of the city is kind of the basic way to say it. So this gives kind of a good table of how we look at sites. We look at the existing use, their realistic development potential, the site size, ownership patterns potentially, and then the development density. And that at the end of that result, that analysis will come back and compare it to our regional housing needs allocation with a table that shows these are the number of units that we need to have. These are the number of units that we found in vacant sites, non-vacant sites, and then kind of see where we're at from there. Overall, the goal is to have a surplus in each category. So if there's changes in the future, the city can easily make the finding that even though, X site is being developed at a lower density, there's enough buffer there that they can do that without having, triggering the no net loss requirements, which can be a pretty cumbersome process. So for the assumptions on site inventory, we don't have a, golden lens. We can't predict exactly what's going to be developed on each site in the future, whether it be, a multifamily development where we say it's going to be 100 units in a housing element may develop at 75 or at 125 or whatever. And we make some assumptions on how each site compares to the regional housing needs allocation and specifically to the income group levels. So typically speaking, for the above moderate, we're looking at single family, large lots as well as small lots. Moderate, we're looking at accessory dwelling units and duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes. And then lower income, typically we associate with lower income traditionally. Not to say that lower income couldn't be single family or vice versa, but that's how we make assumptions in the housing element for the analysis purpose. The next big component, which is new, is the AFFH requirements. And I put the definition of what AFFH means in here, but basically it means to try to combat past patterns of segregation and discrimination as it relates to housing. As it relates to Riverbank, the analysis will go into the varying different categories of AFFH. That's looking at income groups, opportunity. Areas of the city may have less opportunity as it relates to education or jobs or, things of that nature compared to another area of the city. One area of the city may have larger commute patterns than another part of the city. So we kind of take a look at all kind of a comparative analysis between, for Riverbank, a good description is the kind of the east and west side of the city with the Santa Fe Railroad going right through the middle, or using 108 as kind of area that we take a look at and compare with the north and the south portions of the city. Or even, the older part of the city being the downtown specific plan area compared to like Crossroads or now Crossroads West, since that was approved back in 2016. So it's really taking a look at all of those components and making an informed analysis, which will feed into programs that help facilitate more inclusive cities, more inclusive environments. An additional requirements is again, identifying patterns of segregation, areas of racial or ethnic concentration. The state has put out a lot of data as it relates to this with maps and things like that. So getting the data is not really the issue. It's really just taking it and analyzing it specifically to Riverbank. So for timing, we're looking at spending most of 2024 preparing the document. We intend to complete a draft housing element by June, July, and then come back to Planning Commission with that document. We may have an additional workshop or maybe pop-up workshop to try to include more of the residents in this discussion, to try to see what they're seeing as far as housing in Riverbank. I don't live in Riverbank. Miguel previously had, so he does have experience here, living here, but we want to hear from the residents and see what kind of they see as far as housing development in the city. And then, like I said before, once we go through the draft review with Planning Commission and Council, we'll send it out to the state for a 90-day review. And then from there, they'll most likely provide comments. It seems like they're providing comments on every single housing element in the state. And then we'll revise it and bring it back to Planning Commission and Council for review and adoption. And then it goes back to the state for another final review for certification. Now, as far as public review of the document, it's not just at the next Planning Commission meeting that they'll have a chance. There's a 30-day public review period prior to sending it to the state. And we post it on the city's website. That's a requirement now. And we'll also send out a notice in the paper and then send a note to Planning Commission and Council so you can review it for yourselves as well as tell your neighbors and folks that you know in the city to take a look at it and let us know if you have any questions, comments. There's also new requirements for if there are comments that require revision before it goes to the state, then we'll need to do it in red line so people can see where the changes were done and then post it back on the city's website for a 10-day review. So my point in saying that is that there's a lot of opportunity for review with the draft document and public review and public comment through this entire process. This is kind of just the start of the review. Uh-oh. Huh? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so our next steps is, again, outreach and community input, data collection, that's ongoing. We've done a lot of the technical work as far as updating demographics, housing stats and things like that. We've also started on the site inventory in the AFFH analysis. And then obviously our next step is to have the draft housing element done. And I'm available to answer any questions as well as Miguel. And again, this is not an action item at Planning Commission. This is to get input from you folks as well as folks from the public. And I'll give up the dais and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
I have a few.
Yes.
Is the 3591 total units, the projected needed units within the next 8 years? Okay. And then do you drive the city to identify better uses for land use?
Not specifically in that way. What could happen is if the city has a shortfall, meaning that there's not enough sites to meet any of or one or more of the income groups for the regional housing needs allocation, it may require a rezone program that requires the city to rezone sites to meet that requirement.
Okay. And then do you consider future projects, proposed projects like Riverwalk was mentioned earlier. Do you take some of those projects into consideration when putting the housing element together?
We can, yes. Areas within the sphere of influence can be used, and they have been in the last housing element, for instance, the Crossroads West project was in process at that time. And those sites were included in the housing element, but they weren't like a deciding factor or anything, if I remember right. It was used as more of an informational and, like that in the housing element. So to answer your question, yes, sites within the sphere of influence can be used as long as we can demonstrate that within the next 8 years, those sites would be annexed. Not necessarily developed, but annexed and available for residential development during the next planning cycle. Yeah.
I would like to add 3 comments to David's presentation. Thank you, David. In terms of the community workshop, we are envisioning a community workshop in May. This would be a public workshop where the residents can look at the sites inventory analysis. We would identify all the vacant sites, those sites that are undeveloped, that have the potential for redevelopment. And the intent is to get feedback from the residents to see which sites would be recommended if indeed we are short of meeting our arena allocations, and by that meaning we don't have enough land zone to meet that. So we'd tentatively look at a workshop in May that's open to the public. We would encourage the public to come out and look at that. We probably would have it at the community center. The second item is that every year all cities are required to submit an annual progress report to the State Housing and Community Development Department on the city's progress for implementing the housing element. We're expecting to bring that to the Planning Commission here pretty soon, probably March or April. It's due to the state in April, but it's a report that we have to do. All cities have to do that. And we'll be bringing that to the commission soon. I do want to point out that the sites inventory analysis, if the city is indeed short, and we identify sites that should be rezoned, meaning from R1 to like R2 or R3, or from commercial to residential, that would be handled under in a separate and subsequent process. It's not automatic. There will be rezonings and general plan amendments as required. Those would follow their own process. So we just need to identify that, we are committed to doing that. The city's committed to doing that for meeting the regional housing needs allocation. I want to add those things.
Okay, I'm going to open it for public comment. If anyone would like to come up and make a comment, you have the 3 minutes.
Thank you for the presentation. That was very good. The housing element is, of course, a very important document. And I'm happy to see some of the things that have been brought up as new laws. Housing in your commercial areas, you have a lot of, there's a lot of commercial areas here that could be developed into apartment complexes or something of that nature to get your housing numbers up. Another thing seems to be people with the infill. I mean, you've got all the utilities, you've got your sewer, your water, everything is already there. It's just a matter of getting someone to develop it. And that's a very important point of getting more housing there. It saves the, it saves the developers, but obviously sometimes there are people who hang on to these thinking that they're going to go for the last buck, and that's terrible. I don't know how we can there should be a law against that. You can't hold the property just because you don't want to sell it because you want to get more for it later. And I don't know if that could be something that could be changed. And I look at it also, again, if you keep your housing in a smaller footprint, grow up and not out, we can save that farmland. I mean, I've already told you, so you know it is the best farmland in the world. Why are we going to take this away from our descendants? Food prices are going up. I think what really kind of bothers us here in the valley, so many people have planted almonds Well, almonds is just one of the crops. We can grow 230 different crops on this property. When I was a kid, I worked in the fields. I worked in peaches, I worked in berries. You know, I was 15 years old, had to get a or whatever it was, you know, the school thing from the school to go out and work in the fields. And we had all kinds of crops. Grapes were everywhere. And today, the farmers have just put in so many almonds, but don't look at the fields as being almond fields. Because eventually the fields on the east side of the county are going to go bye-bye. That area is very clay soil. What they did is they backhoed little flower pots, except they were tree pots, into that soil, and they planted these trees. If you drive out there, and I drive all over the county, I won't tell you where the best farmland is, but it's around Patterson. But anyway, the trees, the almond trees there are just huge, gigantic. You go over here on the east side and they're dying, they're getting, you know, the salt is building up in the soil. It's just the nitrates in the soil. So we've got to keep this best farmland and we've got to keep it forever, not just for a while. And I mean, one of the fortunate things is we do have the areas that are in the Altamont. I know they're not Patterson, but the people I talked to in Patterson are very happy. The reason they moved to Patterson is because it was such a beautiful community. They wanted to get out of Modesto and Stockton. You know, now we're just going to build houses to bring in people from the Bay Area. It doesn't make sense to me. So I hope you do the right thing and I hope everybody participates and helps out. Thank you.
Do we have any other public comment? Okay, I will close public comment. And since there's nothing for us to vote on, we're going to move on to item 4.2. This is a guidance from Planning Commission on a proposed park design on city-owned property near the intersection of Jackson Avenue and Stanislaus Street. Do we have someone? Miguel, is that you?
Yes, it'll be a joint presentation. Myself and Michael Patton, the Parks and Recreation Director. As you know, the Planning Commission is established to consider and take action on land use entitlement and planning applications. In addition, they're also set up to provide guidance on development standards and things like that. And so what we have before you tonight is a request to provide guidance for a design standard that the city is looking at. So the PowerPoint we have for you is the Tiny Home Village Park. I'll give you a little background and kind of let you know what our main issue is. The Tiny Home Village Park, if we can go into the next slide. I'm sorry, I don't have the clicker with me. Okay. Okay, sorry, thank you. I apologize. Okay, the Tiny Home Village Park project is a city-initiated project. The city issued a request for proposals back in 2023. It was a request to design a property for the construction of transitional housing, which included an open space park. It was on a parcel that was 2 acres. And so a firm was selected to help come up with conceptual design of the property. Oh, I went the wrong way here. This one. Oh, okay, sorry. My first time here with this clicker. So the city has selected a design firm to come up with a design of both the transitional housing project as well as the park. And there's a small part of the property that is identified to be a park. And there are 3 park design considerations which we're going to review. And basically that's what we're coming to the Planning Commission for, is to ask the commission to provide guidance on which is the best park design recommendation that can be presented to the city council. The property is generally located on the west side of Jackson Avenue, north of Stanislaus. I don't know the picture can be moved up a little bit, but maybe not. Okay. It's vacant. Let me go on to the next slide. So the design firm has come up with this design. These are tiny homes. I believe there's going to be 48 of them. And they would have a community center in the upper left corner. There'll be parking. So these are tiny homes there. And the designer was tasked to also incorporate a mini park, a pocket park, almost like a tot lot. And the area in red here is the tot lot that's proposed, a pocket park. This is the latest version of the design. Each of those little squares is a tiny home. The area in red is proposed bathroom, a shelter, and a play area for public access. Again, this is for transitional housing. Each unit would have maybe about 2 to 3 residents. This is for recently emancipated youth, I think up to 20 years of age, 23 years of age. And so as we're working with a design firm, we're thinking, what's the best place to have this park? Do we want it located in the middle? It's going to be fenced off. How accessible is it? Should we move it somewhere else? Should we eliminate it altogether? Should we increase it? And so these are some of the considerations that we were wrestling with. And we went to the city council at their last meeting and kind of sought their direction. And quite frankly, they had a variety of directions. And so we thought we'd come and get the planning commission's recommendation for this. The park is estimated to be 0.28 acres or 0.128 acres. The really small park, the next largest park is Plaza del Rio at 22 acres. The city general plan recommends 1.5 acres for every 1,000 people. This project will not come near that. So some of the issues that we're considering is you have a small park and there's a potential for overcrowding. There's lack of room for conducting physical activities, whether it's basketball or playing soccer or even parking. There's limited capacity for social gatherings. And then it's going to result in increased maintenance costs, having to come to the small area and maintain that and keep it up. So it's not as efficient as we would like it to be. So we presented 3 concepts to the city council. One was to continue with the design of moving forward with the project park, with the park being as is, recommending a larger space dedicated to park development, increasing that, or just forego the park and collect in lieu fees. They just pay their contribution, and that money can be used to provide funding for improvements at existing parks. And so these are 3 options that were presented to the city council. There was discussion as to whether or not a park belongs there, whether the city should look at a different property for a park site. But in terms of providing guidance to the designer, the design firm that was selected, we thought we'd come and ask the planning commission for your thoughts. Let me go back to the design here. Oh, here we go. Michael's here from the Parks Department, the Director of Parks and Recreation. We also have Sean Hahn, who is the designer. He's an engineer that has been involved with the design of the project. So they can talk more about particulars of the park itself, the amenities that will be in there, and some options for incorporation into this site. So we kind of open it up. Michael, or do you have any other things you'd like to bring up?
Good evening, Commission. As Miguel mentioned, my name is Michael Pat. I'm the new Parks and Rec Director here, and so I recognize a couple faces, but one of the things that we're looking at, and we talked about with the City Council trying to get their feedback, when the RP was issued, it mentioned to have affordable or this transitional housing plus a park, there was very close to absolutely no detail on what the park should entail, whether it be playground equipment or just green space, benches, how big, how small. And so it kind of left it up for the designer and the contractor to kind of figure out how best to do it. One of the things that we are looking to do is we want to make sure we have smart parks, that they're well thought out, plan, and with purpose and intention. What I look for when I do parks is 50 years from now, when we have new Parks and Recreation Department, new city council members, new planning commission, they can look back and say that was a smart move. When we look at small parks, they're great, but there are issues to it. They're not well planned out. We believe that a small park, as Miguel said, about the recommendation about 1.5 acres per 1,000 residents. If the small park were to service just this development, be a perfect park. However, with council suggesting that they want this park to not only serve this development, but the surrounding neighborhoods, that's when we come to overcrowding and issues that way. City council is very keen on having a park in this part of town, as the next closest one is Zerillo, and that's a little bit of ways. And so with as Miguel mentioned, with a lot of directions given at council, we're hoping that planning commission can help narrow in a recommendation or a discussion that we can bring back to city council and say, hey, here is what has been discussed at planning commission as a recommendation here. But as Miguel mentioned, I'm here to answer any questions on the perspective from Parks and Recreation. And yeah, thank you.
We also have Brad Hahn, who's with the firm that's designing. If there's anything you'd like to add or share, he's also available for questions. Thanks for coming, Brad.
Brad Hahn, I was told I have to tell you I'm from Modesto, but I love Riverbank. When I'm volunteer, I'm doing this, I'm an engineer, but I'm involved with the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance and trying to help housing projects get going. And this is your project. This isn't our project. This is a project that the city council put out for RFP for transitional housing. So there's an operator involved with this that the supporting services are all part of this whole scheme. It's not just bare residences. And each one of those larger buildings is probably gonna have 4 people in them. So there's going to be a fair amount of folks on this. And the mandate to have the park is that's kind of what we saw the size it would be. Probably more in a perfect world, that would be our open space and not open to the city. And part of the things that you may not realize is we will wall that off so that our folks from the public can't just mosey into the street, into the site, because it's going to be gated, and it's kind of like a gated community, and they're 18 to 23-year-old kids coming out of foster care trying to get their lives, on track. So there's a lot of involvement. Up in the left-hand corner is where the offices and a lot of the classroom spaces are. So there's not a lot of room, and but here again, if the council wants a park, we'll do the park, but it's going to just take away from the affordable housing, and there's no, can't have both. And I think I took it upon myself to go look and see if I could find another site, because it makes more sense, I think, to have a larger site. And I just got an email from city identifying a lot for me to go look at. So I'm just doing it because I think overall it would be better for the community if there was a larger park site that is going to be legitimate. This is really way too small. It's like half the size of the one that's right across the street, I think someone said. So it's really, really tiny. And for kids in this area, we're not going to want them hanging out in a park with the public that's there. So that's kind of where we are with it. We're such that we can redesign it any way it needs to be redesigned. It's just lines on a page right now, but that's the way it's going to function. It's going to function that if that park exists, it's going to be a city park and not going to be one that's used by us unless they go outside the gate and come back in, because we just, it's the only way to have control over the population that's there. And there's no parking for it. It's just, it's too small, but that's up to you guys to decide.
Thank you, Brad. From a planning perspective, my recommendation would be that this public park be incorporated into the project and not be a public park. It should be a private open space for that site. A public park should be on a larger site. It should be somewhere else in the neighborhood. And it should have more use, meaning, play areas, equipment, things like that. And it should be situated and developed where members of the surrounding community should be able to access it. Oftentimes there are, people walk to them, but, there's practical issues here of, where do people park? The parking lot going to be available to the folks here? I suspect it won't be, it'll be gated. There's issues of maintenance and things like that. I think when you look at the general plan, there's an identification of a community park, a regional park, and a neighborhood park. And this small park, even though the city is trying to meet a need that hasn't been provided in the past, I think there's other opportunities to look at other parts of the neighborhood. My recommendation would be to forego the public park and incorporate this park area into the project site, kind of move it up to the interior and make it more centrally located over there. But that's just a planning recommendation. So we turn it over to you and for your guidance. I will add that when this project does come back, it will come back for our architectural site plan review, and the planning commission will be able to take formal action on that application at that time. But your guidance, your input will help us in refining the park design for this site, for this area. Thank you.
I would agree. I think you're looking like at a 5,000 square foot space. And if it's going to be separated from the rest of the project, you're looking at having 7 or 8 foot concrete walls around this park. And when you talk about the park, like what the gentleman from the Parks and Recreation said, if we want to look in the future and say that this was a good idea, I don't think having a rectangular 5,000 square foot space is a good idea. I agree that if it's going to happen, it should be incorporated within the development, especially if it's going to be gated. I think it should be a space perhaps across from maybe the proposed community center, if you want to have a park space there, but I don't think it makes sense to make it accessible to the public. It's too small.
I have a question. You mentioned in lieu fees. Can you explain more about what that means? Anyone?
I can. The state of California adopted what's called the Quimby Act. And basically, when you divide land or develop land, instead of requiring the developer to actually provide land or furnish it, the developer has the option of paying like an in lieu fee in exchange for giving up land or improving it. They provide money to the city, and that money can be used for an intended purpose, like, park equipment, park improvements, things like that.
The developer pays the in lieu fees to the city. Okay, and if I understand what you're saying, you would recommend that we don't have the park on the 0.12 acres, but we put it somewhere else down the road. I tend to agree.
Yeah, for example, if you needed a park and open space, you could take that upper left-hand corner. Looks like there's 2 residences that are across the parking area. You could incorporate an open space where it's more centrally located and have room for more housing. And I think it would make better use of the space.
I'd like to add, I was at the city council meeting last week where they discussed all this. And some of the salient points I think that the council brought up for us to consider is that you kind of can't have both. If we are adding park space, it's going to take away space that could be used for the residences for the transitional housing that would be in there. So it's got a balance that, they're going to say, how do we get the right amount of residences and right amount of park space? The point was discussed, like you said, and it was brought up that If that's just a public park open to the public, it would be separated from the residents there, so they would not have direct use of it. And that makes a very, very tiny park for the public. There was talk of making it private open space, a private park basically just for the use of the residents. That was something that they brought up as a possible option, which I think would be feasible, having looked at some of the alternate layouts that have been there. And also, I think it should be noted that the residents of this are, they're the at-risk youth that recently emancipated coming out of the foster care programs in the area. And so they are kind of an at-risk young adult. So this housing is going to be an important element to that. And I think that was brought up at the meeting of, you know, as many units as we can provide for this need in the community would be something to consider. You know, I understand that the specific development, you know, requirements and ordinances say X amount of park space should be provided. There was direction given for the project to provide park space. But the practicality of it, I think, is what they're looking for guidance from us. And that's what the council was discussing last week as well, is, you know, practically, how can we do that? And like Miguel and Michael have said, that is it best to try to put it on this site, which is it 2 acres? Is that how much the gross site is right now?
Yeah, so overall size about 2 acres, the
Yeah.
park size 0.1.
Right,
acres.
right. So the whole site being 2 acres, that's not really big. I mean, you know me, I work in land development myself, and I'm used to much larger projects than this, but you know, that's a very tiny amount of park space to go with this community or with this development. So one of the options that was put forth Tuesday night also was that, is there another location in the general neighborhood that would be suitable, that could be acquired or, you know, to be developed into a park? Like that big open lot directly north of it. But yeah, that was another thing that was brought up. So, and those were the things that I felt came out from the council meeting last week that are this kind of some of the salient points that it sounded like the council was looking for our input on, you know, what we feel would be the good direction to go in, so the developer can focus their direction and the council can, you know, provide their guidance as well.
At this time, we'll open it for public comment.
Good evening, Deanna Garcia, Crossroads here in Riverbank, and the different slideshows that were shown earlier, the one without the park, I was counting the houses, and it seemed like that one would add the most housing for the project. And I believe the project is of great necessity. It doesn't only serve at youth foster care children that are aging out, but also our couch surfing students within our school district that are homeless, that are living in their parents' cars, living in relatives' couches. So this is going to be a great opportunity to change a lot of youth's future by giving them an opportunity for a good, stable chance of life. And I'd hate to see some very small park that doesn't do our community any good take up 3 or 4 houses that could house, you know, 4 to 12 people and change futures and change lives, where I don't see this park changing anybody's future or life. And the other thing about putting the community center where the community center is located right in front, a nice park area where those 2 houses are there. There was one of the slides where it had more housing where that park would be. It was like rolls, there we go. And then see where that like triangle is area right there where that little walkway. Yeah, that right there, a little further down, right in front. So that is the community center. And then it looks like it has a walkway. And then that area right there could be our green space for gathering, maybe some picnic tables or some benches or some barbecuers for our community to get together and to be able to, you know, if we have something at the clubhouse or at the community center, maybe afterwards we could go out there and enjoy the fresh air. And also, it's just nice to have a place with some fresh air. We're gonna have a lot of rural housing, but look how many people we're gonna be able to help and change their life. And thank you for your time.
Any other public comment? Yeah, are we accepting them?
Just for the sake of, we can take this one. Because I'm not 100% certain of the city's current policy, but it is my understanding that we're not taking Zoom comments anymore. But if there's only one, then I would say allow it and move on. If we can.
Yes. Do we know the person's name? If there's someone on Zoom that would like to make a comment, your mic should be available to speak. You can try *6 to unmute.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello? Hello, we can hear you. Okay, just to let you know, no, I do not have a comment on this item. I've had my hand up since the previous item, but now since you passed that and you didn't want to hear any comments from anybody other than what you heard, thank you very much for ignoring me.
Is that it? Okay, we will close the comment period. And at this time, are we going to make a recommendation or do we have more commissioners' comments?
I'd like to make a motion
yeah.
that we,
I would say you have some options here. It depends what staff is looking for.
Right?
Go-
Let me
go ahead,
review
you
the
can-
recommendations. 3 recommendations were provided to the planning commission. One is to continue with the design of a limited park space of about 0.2 acres. That's one recommendation I can make to the city council. 2, recommend a larger space dedicated to park development. It can be on site or somewhere else in the neighborhood. Or 3, forego the addition of the park and just collect in lieu fees. These are the 3 recommendations that were asked of the city council, and so we're asking them of you and see which ones you would favor. Obviously, there's other options, but these were the 3 that were presented to the city council. So staff recommends that you select one of these, and or if you have any questions, we can respond to questions, or you want to continue your discussion, you're welcome to do so.
I would also add that I'm sure staff and count a unified opinion is maybe what they're seeking, but if there's different opinions on the planning commission, you guys are welcome to voice those, and we will record it and present that to the city council if there's different opinions.
make a motion, we recommend to the city council options 3 and the recommendations.
I would like to ask a question about number 1. This is to continue with the design of limited park space, but that is to be open to the public. That is not to be just for the community center.
Right, it would be available to everyone, including the members of the project site, so for both folks.
Okay. I would second his motion to go with recommendation number 3, to forego the addition of the park.
Right, you don't have, a motion is not required.
Okay. These are
Just consensus or opinion among the group.
I would agree with option number 3.
Everybody's looking at me. Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, given the constraints of the site, options 2 or 3 would be the way to go. Although I know that there was some talk of not having a public park space, but having open space on the site usable for the residents there, which our speaker, or I'm sorry, I don't remember your name when you came up, mentioned, thank you. Had mentioned, that little triangular space across from the community center, something that we could be on site. It would be just for the use of the residents there, though. That was something that was tossed around at the city council that I think would be a perfectly viable option as well.
Yes, thank you. We'll provide a report, a recommendation to the city council that the majority of the planning commission had elected to go with option 3, forego the addition of the park and collect park and loop fees, and consider even having a private open space that's dedicated to the residents of that transitional housing project be maintained, and that not being a public park. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's too small to be public. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to item 5, Planning Commission comments. Anybody have any comments? Hearing none, I will move on. Item 6, county referral, correspondence, or information.
There are no comments or referrals.
Okay, and item 7, any staff comments?
I have what I call a planning director's report. It covers 3 topics. 1 is recent city council actions, 2 is upcoming planning items, and 3 is housekeeping items. So let me start with city council actions. On December 12th, 2023, the city council recognized Donna Kinney on her retirement from the city of Riverbank. Also at that meeting, the new director, which you met today, Michael Patton, was introduced. At that meeting, the planning commissioners, Natasha Basso, John Stewart, Michael Holterman, and alternate Ben Rubin were conducted their oath of office for the planning commission terms. At that meeting, they also conducted the first reading of the ordinance amending the traffic code. This had to do with the stopping, standing, or parking vehicles and where it's prohibited and limited parking. On January 8th, 2024, they conducted the second reading of that proposed ordinance amendment. So I believe is effective now. You can't leave a RV or some vehicle parked there for more than 72 hours. You gotta move it some distance away. On January 23, they approved the River's Edge South and the River's Edge North parcel maps. These were phases 1 and 2, the approved vesting tender map. River's Edge, which is located at 6612, 64, 72 Central Avenue. On February 13th, they discussed the park space for the tiny home village that you just discussed. For upcoming planning commission items, just 2 items. 1, I want to alert you, if you're not aware, that there will be a presentation of the Riverwalk specific plan and draft EIR. There'll be a presentation to the city council. It will be held next Tuesday, February 27th at 6 p.m. at the community center. The public is welcome to come and hear this. Is again information to the city council. They're not going to be taking any action, but it's to solicit comments and kind of get the word out. Comments on the draft EIR due to the city Monday, March 18th, 2024. On the horizon, in March, we are tentatively scheduling the March 12th meeting. March 12th meeting. We're going to try to bring March 18th. I apologize. The annual progress report of the housing element. We kind of talked a little bit about that. That's due to the state in April, so we want to bring it to the commission and take that to the city council, so that'll be coming your way. Under housekeeping items, the conflict of interest form 700 are due to the city clerk by 5:30 on April 2nd, Monday, April 2nd, 2024. And kind of a short notice, but to let you know, item number 2, the Planning Commission Academy is scheduled for March 6th through the 8th in Long Beach. If you are interested in going, please contact Janet Smolin, and she can coordinate some of those details. So I think we passed out some information that's in front of you on that Planning Commissioners Academy that's held every year. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Miguel. And that's wraps it up. So as it's my last day of the chair, I will end this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Natasha.